The mix effects on Koala are a game changer. Some of them are amazing, some of them I wouldn't touch with a barge pole, and some of them are weird and complicated, but they're really worth learning, and you can do a lot with them once you get used to it. So let's take a look at some of the best and some of the worst. So the first thing to note is that we're talking about the mix effects. They're the ones that you have to use on a bus, which is either one sample or like a group of samples that you put together because they do the same kind of thing. We're not talking about the performance effects. Performance effects are amazing. I use them all the time. But the mix effects can do something pretty different. So if you want to use the mix effects, first thing you need to do is to set the bus for this sample. You can call them, they come default as like bus A, bus B, bus C, but do yourself a favor, go into performance, go into the mixer and change it to something a bit more user-friendly, right? Drums, that makes sense. So I've got a drum beat here, plain and simple, no effects on it. But if I go in here, I can start to add different effects onto that bus. And then that will play whenever I play just the drums. So the next few to talk about are what I would call like tape effects. Now, I'm calling them that because a lot of these things came about in the 50s and 60s where people, especially the Beatles and their engineers, worked out that if you took the same recording, whether it's of vocals or of drums or whatever, had it on two identical reel-to-reel cassettes, played them both back at the same time, and then messed around making them slightly different, slowing this tape down a little bit, leaving a big delay between the two reel-to-reels, or slowing one down and then speeding it up, you get these different kinds of effects: phaser, flanger, chorus, whatever it is. So the first one's called phaser. Now, one thing that Koala does really well, I think, is it gives you this visual representation of what the effect sounds like. This one's kind of like a weird space pattern thing, because that's kind of what it sounds like. And when you change the depth, that will change what the graphic looks like. When you change the feedback, it makes it more. When you the rate, the speed of the thing changes. So let's hear it. Pretty cool. Now, along the same kind of lines, you've got flanger as well. It's kind of a more extreme effect. It really sounds kind of like early 70s acid rock type thing. That's why the graphics are a bit more psychedelic. Again, sounds like this. Chorus is again in the same kind of family, but it's a lot more subtle. So it's often used to kind of sweeten up vocals to make it sound like there's more than one person singing, which is why it's got the name chorus. It's more subtle, like I say. It's probably, you'll use it probably more than others because the others are very obvious that you're actually you're putting an effect on the sound. This is a bit more subtle, stays in the back a bit more. And then the final one, which to me is a similar kind of sound and you use it for similar purposes, but actually it's pretty different, is a filter, just a normal kind of bandpass filter. But the great thing you can do with the effects with Koala is you can put the effect of if you're turning the knob slowly. So what do you call an LFO, a low frequency oscillator. So you put the effect on whatever it is, and then it will adjust slowly over time if you turn that LFO on. It's going down, it's coming back up again. Like that. I think it gives a nice bit of movement, especially if you leave it quite slow, so that one of the elements might be changing over the course of 4-8 bars. You can have different elements where the LFO is changing at different times, so that gives a nice kind of movement in and out where one thing will become more prominent as the other one's going away. It's a nice thing to play around with. So first up then, delay and reverb. These are things that you're probably going to want to use like in almost every song that you do, really. Delay and reverb kind of give a sense of the place that things are in. Not everything's right there at your ears. Reverb puts things further back, like they're in a big room. Delay gives a kind of echo effect. You know what delay is, but it sounds much more professional than just having everything kind of flat or just whacking a delay onto everything. If you look at this sequence where I've got the drum beat and a piano, we can add some delay just to the drums. This is the basic delay. You can sync it up to the tempo of the track, so you can put it on like a quarter note delay or something like that. There's a stereo effect there. You can set the left and the right to be different things, which can get confusing pretty quickly, but if you're careful with it, you can give a nice like stereo width to it, and it's just a really cool effect to have. As well as that normal delay, there's also a tape delay. So with a tape delay, every time it echoes, it's going to decay a little bit, and it's not going to be a perfect echo back of what you sent to it. Tape delay for me is more useful. It sounds a bit more warm and vintage. It's a bit less mechanical, and that's the one I normally reach for first of all. Reverb is called reverb, and it gives you the idea that your sample is in a room, a decent sized room. So the important thing is, because I've got that on the bus, on the drums bus, it's not affecting the piano. The piano is not in the same room as the drums. Yeah, the next ones are distortion. So I don't really use a lot of distortion. I don't think it sounds great on drums most of the time. But one thing I do really like it on is bass. So I'll show you a bit of that. I've added a bass track to this. And there is one distortion on here that I do think is very cool. So I'll show you that one first. It's called Bit Cooker. The effect is kind of a digital distortion, trying to make things like an 8-bit or like a low quality digital kind of effect on something. Again, it's always best to just play it, isn't it? The visual effect that's used on Koala screen, I think, really gives a good indication of what the sound's going to be like. It's nice. The other ones I like less. So you've got a ring mod, which is like a really extreme effect, which sort of takes everything, distorts it, and then makes it all the same pitch. And you've also got an LFO. I think the fact I like it better when I turn it off shows that, you know, it's not really my thing, but I'm sure it's got its place. Drive is a pretty heavy distortion. Clipper is a bit more subtle, just kind of bends the edges of the sound wave, really, kind of like forcing an overdrive into an analog tube. Bit nicer. As I said, one thing I do like to use distortion on is bass lines. I think it really thickens them up and fattens them up. So I've got a simple bass line here. Something nice to play with for melodic things, nice for vocals to give it that distorted edge. But for me, yeah, I think Bit Cooker's the one. Okay, the last couple of things I want to talk about are more kind of modern studio effects. The stuff I've mentioned before, it's kind of been around for a long time. It's a lot of effects that we use just with guitar music in the 60s and 70s. These things are kind of a bit more modern, or at least the way we use them now is a bit more modern, a bit more around electronic music. So first of all, it's sidechain. The idea behind sidechain is that you take one sound and then you drop the volume of that sound every time another sound comes in. So if you've got like a long keyboard pattern, maybe you want that keyboard pattern to drop every time the kick drum hits. In fact, that's like 99% of the time, that's how it's used. So what I've got here is the keys are set up against the sidechain against, first of all, the bass. So every time the bass notes hit, the keys are going to drop down. Okay. So then we can do the same sidechain, sorry, but this time against the drums. That's a bit more subtle because the drums are in there a lot of the time. You can definitely have it where you just set up one single track that's just got the kick drum, for example, and that's the thing that will trigger the sidechain. A lot of the time you do it with hi-hats as well. It can be quite cool with vocals, but a lot of the time it's used to get this sort of like pumping effect for synths. I just think it sounds corny and I don't like it. So what can you say? Daft Punk are cool with it, but almost everyone else, no, not for me. The last one is something that I figured out because there's a group called Bicep that you probably know, and they use an effect that I really love. It's kind of a gating effect that they use on synths and particularly on vocals, particularly on the track Glue. I think it sounds amazing. And I wanted to do something similar. So I worked out one way you could do it to get that kind of flicking in and out effect, like you turn the volume up and down super quickly with like a rhythm to it. You could use a utility called AutoPan. It didn't seem like an obvious thing to do at first, but actually it worked out really well. So first of all, the sample that I'm using,
yeah, that's right,
is one that you might recognize from my Boards of Canada record from Sesame Street. And what I did is I added this AutoPan effect. So with a really quick speed and a kind of rather than a sine wave, one that's very square that goes up and down. So it's very quickly going from completely left to completely right to completely left to completely right. If you do that, and then you use another utility that only takes the left-hand channel, it's got the effect of turning all the volume all the way up and then all the way down again super quickly. So you get that really choppy effect.
yeah, that's right.
It's kind of too rough to use just like that, but if you add a bit of reverb, a bit of delay, and some filter just to make it sound a bit sweeter, you get something that's kind of approaching that Bicep sound.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that's the joy of some of these effects. Like they're maybe not obvious the way to use them at first, but if you keep playing, keep experimenting, I always have a lot of fun doing it. So hopefully you will do the same. All right. Cheers to John for suggesting this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.